Were you always a comics fan as a kid, or like because
it's a weird one. That's that no sounded disbelieving. As an actual real kid, as in like a pre-teen, I read like all the stuff on the newsagent shelves and that kind of like that. Especially at my age, was a very casual thing to do. Yeah, and I kind of fell out of comics in the teens because I'm from Stafford and I don't believe it had a comic shop then. So even if I wanted to go into comics, I couldn't. But I was, especially because I read the music press, I read the games press. Especially at that time, there was kind of a soft discussion of it, as in the idea that they talked about Watchmen, they talked about Dark Knight Returns.
It was in the air,
in your Sinclair at the time. There was an awareness of this is part of culture. So I knew about stuff, and I was like, that sounds interesting.
I'd love to read that.
I love to read that. There's no access to it.
Yeah.
So in my 20s, I picked up Watchmen when I was 21. And that was kind of like my headshot moment. Yeah. And that kind of changed me fundamentally. But it took me until I was 25. I was like about my 2.5 years into PC Gamer. I just started going to comic shops more often because there's one in Bath, which is where Future's based. Yeah. And one day I just hit a book called The Authority by Warren Ellis, and I kind of fell in. And that moved me very quickly. Next week I discovered Planetary. Next week I discovered Transmet. Yeah. The week after that I was on the Warren Ellis forum, which was a very, very big thing in like circa 2000. In fact, a lot of the quite like larger names of creators circa now kind of came from there. You're talking about people like Matt Fraction and me, Kelly Sue, and it was almost like a revolutionary sell. It feels. That's what I was saying. It's very weird about how successful Image is right now. Feels like the WEF winning. This is kind of what our idea is what comics should be. Yeah. Transplanted forward 15 years, which is very strange. But I sort of, and then Warren Ellis forum was acted as my education. I basically learned so much about comics because people talked about stuff, and it was very Catholic education. It was like manga and French comics and American comics, and it was all kind of viewed as a kind of this is the medium. So I fell in love in that kind of way. I went to my first con 6 months after that. Came home drunk from that con, wrote my first strip, and like the next year I had my first like webcomic out, and the year after that I took a collection of these webcomics to the con, was selling them. A guy called Jamie McKelvey walked up, showed me his portfolio, and I said we should do a book called Phonogram. And then 4 years after that, Phonogram's out. Yeah. So it's that kind of, I just basically people say it's like people who are late converts to religion are a lot more fanatical than early converts. I was a late convert. And I'm like, I came in with like all this energy, and I was kind of heading towards being I stress I really did enjoy my time at Future, but at that point 2.5 years into being there, I was aware that I'd kind of done not on everything I could do there, but I was aware that I was like writing about 50 pages a month or something. Jesus. I think my highest for PC Game was 37. I was still doing about 10, 12, 13 pages of freelance other people. Plus, page counts were much bigger. Word counts were much bigger then. There was like 800 words a page. Nice. So, fine. But that was like, if you actually read PC Gamer that period, like 98 to like 2000, you're pretty much reading my diary, and like you can map it. I'm like, there's a running joke like Eurogamer readers mock it in that kind of, it's a Kieron Gillen stealth girlfriend review. when I'm really sort of mentioning this girl I was seeing, it was very complicated. And I was like, it was really just all the creative ideas I had went in that magazine, and at that point I realised why I'm actually doing this, and that's kind of, I started working less hard on the magazine. As in not to the level of complete and utter psychosis. And started doing
siphoning something off
and doing my own. And for that point onwards, I basically my day job was a video game journalist, and my night job was I worked on comics. And eventually people started paying me for the comics. Like I said, 2006 was Phonogram, and then I started getting work for hire stuff like the year after that, like 2007, 2008. And when people started paying me, I started doing it during the day because I could work out meat by doing this. And about the time 2009, I realised despite thinking I am a games journalist who occasionally does comics, I looked at the money I was making. No, I'm a comic writer who occasionally does games journalism. So I started thinking myself in that way. And in 2010, I kind of explicitly did a kind of, it is over now. I am now not doing any more games journalism except when I cannot help myself.
How did you adapt to writing comics, and how do you approach writing a comic? Do you write very detailed descriptions? Do you direct the art, or do you write a very loose kind of
set of notes you hand
over?
The fact I mean, there's two traditional ways of writing comics, and which is Marvel method, and I apologise
Yes.
if I'm being boring to anybody who knows this, and the full
No,
script.
I think it's good.
No,
I think
that's
it's
good
good
for it,
to
yeah,
use, but yeah.
Marvel method is the short way of describing it was pretty much invented by Marvel in the 60s, and the idea is the writer writes a story almost, occasionally broken up into pages, as in this happens on this page 1, but occasionally not, and then the artist adapts the story, and then the writer comes in afterwards and adds the dialogue.
Okay.
And that's got various strengths. There's a kind of symbiotic energy, and the artist has a lot more freedom.
Yeah.
Its weaknesses, it would include, it really is putting a lot of faith in the artist. If it goes wrong, it goes amazingly wrong.
It's really good when you have Jack Kirby.
If I could actually resurrect Jack Kirby, it might work. I've done some stuff in Marvel Method. It's worth stressing, but it does put so much faith in the artist.
Yeah.
And in terms of it's the Warren Ellis, I learned to write from reading a few Warren Ellis columns. That was my starting place. And it's sort of, you may be thinking these pages have to be talking heads, like a serious conversation where you explain the plot, and the artist may think, I really want to have a draw picture of a dinosaur.
Yeah.
And then you come back and you realise you've got a page of dinosaur. I've got to put some dialogue on the dinosaur.
Yeah.
And I've had some dialoguing dinosaur moments, because that's that's part of the fun of the medium. Oh my god, what the hell am I going to do? Full script is the other way of doing it, and the way I primarily works. And it's like the world's most anal screenplay. In terms of page 1, panel 1, medium shot of 3 men talking about comics in the IGN room. The men look like this, descriptions, dialogue, Kieron, colon. I'm going to tell you about comics. Panel 2, close on Kieron, waving his hands around like an idiot. Comics, this is, you know what I mean?
You're very complicated.
That sounds really good, though. But
it's like
controlling that sounds amazing.
And the question is you can write that. It's but the artist, how much will the artist choose to follow it?
He has to submit to it in a way.
And I don't want them. I think it's a soft back and forth. As in, I start all my scripts. I write heavy scripts. I mean, not heavy like Alan Moore. Alan Moore does about like 20,000 words a script, and not light. There's people who write lighter than me. My scripts for like Marvel tend to be about 5,000-6,000 words. My scripts for like create our own projects tend to be a bit longer. I generally write what I need. And I tend to make myself quite personal. If I know the artist, I write jokes for them, or I talk in a human way. Pretty much all my scripts start with, I write the way I write because I want to make sure there is a way to tell the story. This is not saying you have to tell the story this way. You're an artist, you've got a better visual imagination I am, by definition. That's why you're the artist.
Interesting. Do you ever draw anything? Because I listened to interviews with Jeff Johns and Grant Morrison, and they kind of do rough sketches. They hand it off to the artist. But again, as kind of suggestions, and
I only sketch when I only sketch when something I am trying to describe is impossible. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. As in, like, there's definitely me and Jamie McKelvey tend to push the form. So occasionally I get an idea for a sequence, and that it just doesn't translate to words. So I'll do a scribble or like that kind of thing, and then Jamie will run with it. It's like. I mean, I normally describe my scripts a bit like love letters. It's about trying to seduce somebody into making them do what you want to do. As in, please fall in love with me. There is that element to it for me. As in, here is a persuasive argument why I think this is the best way to do it. But tell me if I'm full of shit. Sorry.
That's fine.
So that's kind of the collaboration is really the interesting part of it for me. But for me, the reason why I write full script is because I like comics and I like stories. But specifically, I go into comics to write comics. And if I'm not writing full script and calling individual panels, not necessarily like the details, but if I'm not doing the pacing that level, I don't feel I'm writing comics. I feel I'm writing a story which someone else adapts to comics. And that's kind of not something I'm particularly interested in, because if it was, I would get into a different medium. But that's my particular approach.